Ready, go.
Let's kick this off. My name is Lynn Newman. I'm a member of the Gowanus Neighborhood Coalition for Justice, I'm representing the organizational number 350 Brooklyn, which counters the climate crisis through local action. I'm also a local artist that directs Artichoke Dance Company, working at the intersection of performance innovation and environmental engagement. GNCJ does not support the rezoning of Gowanus unless our top 3 demands are met.
Yeah!
Yeah! Number 1, full capital funding for local NYCHA developments. Number 2, net zero CSOs into the Canal. Number 3, the creation of the Gowanus Zoning Commitment Task Force. GNCJ has been meeting for over 5 years around the impending rezoning of Gowanus, and it's committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the justice issues that are central to this moment in time. Let's not forget that at this time last year, in the midst of rising numbers of the coronavirus pandemic, people were taking to the streets following the brutal murder of George Floyd. The racial issues, economic issues, environmental justice issues are all the same, and we must acknowledge and demand that people of all races, incomes, cultures have a right to a safe quality of life, including here in Gowanus.
Yeah.
GNCJ is made up of people and organizations representing fair housing, tenants' rights, environmental rights, business development, the arts, and faith-based organizations. We center public housing residents' voices in our coalition. GNCJ is built on 6 principles: advancing racial and economic justice, respecting, protecting, connecting public housing and its residents, creating affordable housing and protecting tenant displacement, promoting environmental justice, recognizing and celebrating culture and community of the longtime Gowanus residents, protecting local businesses and industries. Right. We believe any rezoning implemented in the neighborhood must adhere to these principles, which we established early in our process to guide our recommendations to the city on a just and inclusive rezoning. In 2016, the Department of City Planning officially announced their intention to rezone Gowanus Neighborhood. After 2.5 years of engagement, their proposal was officially released in January 2019, with the draft environmental impact statement being released last month. Regarding our number 1 demand, the DEIS Mental's Rental Assistant Demonstration, also known as RAD, as options, and infill as options for public funding for funding for public housing. But these are not acceptable.
No red, no infill. No red, no infill. No red, no infill.
The people that will be affected, the people of public housing, reject this option. So this cannot be considered as viable. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Blondell and Monica Underwood.
Thank you. Come on up, Monica.
Hey, how you doing?
So, my name is Karen Blondell, and this is Monica Underwood. We're sisters who make it happen over here in Gowanus. We're public housing residents. We're members of the Gowanus Neighborhood Coalition for Justice. And we feel that this rezoning should not go forward unless we have upfront funding for local public housing. That would be Wyckoff Gardens and Gowanus houses. Yeah. As a part of the DEIS, the city has proposed NYCHA 2.0. We reject red and infill for Gowanus and Wyckoff Gardens. We do not want privatization. We want to keep public housing public. Keep public housing public. Keep public housing public. Keep public housing public. So again, when we're asking the DEIS or the city planning to remove any NYCHA 2.0, we've been working on this for over 5 years. There are other alternatives, including we'd like to continue to discuss the public trust with Greg Russ, who is the CEO of NYCHA. We want to hear more. We know that there are still some challenges to that legislation, but we feel that we are a strong enough group to work through those matters.
That's right.
We also support our Congresswoman, Nydia Velasquez, who has an infrastructure bill in called HR 235.
That's right.
Please go and support HR 235. Thank you so much.
My name is Monica Underwood. I am a Wyckoff Gardens resident. I'm Executive Director of Families United for Racial and Economic Equality.
Yeah.
I'm also the co-founder of the Public Housing Civic Association.
Yeah.
And I have been a loyal coalition member of the Gowanus Neighborhood Coalition for Justice.
Yeah.
For the past 5 years, we have met with our coalition, New York City Housing Authority, our local electives, the Department of City Planning, and local nonprofits who are tasked with accountable community development. We, the residents of Gowanus, say accountable to whom? We continue to reject the privatization of our public housing properties that are embedded in a draft environmental impact statement. We have written letters to our electeds, Community Ward 6, the Deputy Mayor's Office, and New York City Housing Authority, clearly stating our demand for upfront funding to address the physical needs here at Wyckoff Gardens and the Gowanus houses. We demand that the city remove all references to NYCHA 2.0 in regards to RAD or info as a solution to the coalition's #1 demand to fix local public houses before you rezone Gowanus. We as long-term members of the community say no to this rezone unless the rezoning meets all 3 of our demands.
Yeah.
Upfront funding for Gowanus and Wyckoff Gardens before you rezone. No additional combined sewer overflow in the Gowanus Canal. The creation of a community task force that has the ability to make sure all commitments by the city of New York and the developers are met.
Yeah.
And I also want to say something about our young people. We have a lot of young people in NYCHA and New York City Housing Authority who have the technology and the knowledge, and they need jobs, and they should be included because they're contributing to our society.
Yeah.
So
right.
let's not forget our young people, okay? As a grandmother of 8 grandsons and 1 granddaughter, let's not forget who are all accomplished. Let's not forget our young people.
Yeah.
Because they're going to change the world.
Yeah.
Executive Director of Gowanus Canal Conservancy, and I'm here to talk about our #2 demand, which is the only one that the city has partially met. You can see we're giving it a check minus down here. We want to get it to a check. So combined sewage overflow is the greatest source of ongoing pollution to the Gowanus Canal. The overloaded sewer system currently discharges about 363 million gallons of raw sewage and polluted runoff into the canal each year. To ensure new development does not increase pollution, we demand a net zero rezoning. The DEIS shows the outcome that is actually better than net zero, reducing the overall CSO volumes by 5 million gallons per year, but that's only with the forthcoming Unified Stormwater Rule in place. Absent this rule, the city concedes the CSO would increase by 3 million gallons per year. So to ensure our demand is met, it is imperative that the new rule be in effect prior to the issuance of the first site sewer connection in the Gowanus rezoning area, and that the city must provide transparent reporting on implementation. The DEIS is a projection. We need to see the reality as it plays out on the ground. As new buildings are constructed, the community must have access to reporting that proves that new development does not add pollution or worsen neighborhood flooding through a community-based task force that holds the city and developers accountable. Finally, the city must anticipate the impacts of climate change and acknowledge existing limitations of the sewer system through clear commitments for future infrastructure that will address sewer capacity issues identified in the DEIS. The work that DEP has already done on the local sewer model is actually a step towards a comprehensive hydrology study that the community has been asking for years. The city must commit to completing this hydrology study and identify what infrastructure investment is needed, which could include upgrades to the Bond-Lorraine sewer line, additional sewer separation projects, specifically in the IBZ, and right-of-way and street end green infrastructure. Thank you all, and I'm going to turn it over to S.J. Avery to talk about
Again, this coalition will not support the rezoning unless our top 3 demands are met. Full capital funding for local NYCHA development, net zero CSO, and the creation of a Gowanus zoning commitment task force to hold the city and all parties accountable now and after the rezoning. And I'm here to talk about this 3rd issue. After a decade of community meetings about the future of the Gowanus neighborhood, this is not the time to stop civic engagement. The Gowanus rezoning is a massive undertaking, significantly dependent on capital commitments at the city, state, and federal level. No other rezoning plan has the economic complexity and interdependence that the Gowanus plan has. Literally hundreds of millions of dollars are going to be spent at 3 levels of government, not to mention by private developers, in the coming 15 years of rezoning. The physical and social impact of the development on current residents, and most notably a lot of our NYCHA brothers and sisters, will be substantial. The public services, things like schools, sanitation, sewer and water, traffic control, open space, public health services, and so forth, needed for the projected 30,000 additional residents will likewise be costly. Even now, there are huge unanswered questions about what kind of support for NYCHA housing? What's the real status of infrastructure investment? What happened to the promised support for artists? And what exactly are they doing with the Gowanus mix? I want to keep my eye on what actually happens in the next 15 years. The Gowanus Commitment Task Force, bringing together representatives from local organizations, city agencies, and stakeholders, is key to monitoring compliance with commitments in the Gowanus Neighborhood Plan.
Yes.
The city needs to support it and fund it.
Yeah.
Yes! No more empty promises.
That's right.
No more zoning surprises. We have to assure accountability, and a Gowanus zoning commitment task force is an important step in that direction.
Now? I didn't know what he said now. I'm the TA president from Gowanus, and TA president from Wyckoff is coming on our way. So two things that bothers me out of anything is that, first of all, when you walk this person's house, you greet the head of household first, then everybody else after that. We are the leaders, and we be left out on a lot of things that bothers me. And the other thing that bothers me is that housing authority is not being held accountable for nothing that they don't do.
No accountability.
You understand? And that's up and down the line. You know, right now we have a community center that's the size of maybe 4 cars. Okay? It took 20 years for them to even start talking about renovating it. Now they're talking about it might take another 2 years for them to finish it. Now, if you take 25 years to put a car together, that got to be a fantastic car. You know? But my whole thing is going back to again is like the union side. We always seem to forget the union side. You know, everybody's talking about rezoning this and taking that off this and all this other kind of stuff. But what about the residents? They're the ones that's going to be counting the most because it affects them the most. And we talking about red and blue and green and all that stuff like that. Yeah, let's not talk about that. Let's do something about making things better for the residents. That's the thing that counts. Right now, Washington is talking about giving them $40 billion. Okay, now but there's another thing. Just the part I'm trying to say is that they said that it's going to take $25 billion for them to do what they need to do. Well, you got $15 billion in the hole. What you going to do with that $15 billion in the hole? All right? What you going to leave it there? Use it. That's what you need to do. Use it. And they're not using things. Their biggest problem is, as a former worker and a resident there, I was in the system with them. I know how the system works, and it don't work. It don't work because there's no accountability with anybody. And this is why you have the problem that you do have, not just in Gowanus, not just in Wyckoff. I'm talking about throughout housing. That's why you have these problems that you do have, because nobody's getting held accountable. And then at the end, you got everybody pointing fingers at us, not them. You know, we don't make the rules, we don't enforce the rules, we live there. That's what we do. We live there. And a lot of people here be paying rents that's outstanding, $2,000 a month and stuff like that there, but you don't get nothing for that $2,000 a month that you put your money out. So everybody's being cheated. I don't care if you don't have a job and it's being paid by social service or whatever, you're still a resident and you still have rights. And we don't have rights down there. Nobody has rights down there, because if we do have rights down there, they will be doing what they're supposed to do. Right now, what's the name? HUD says that we're partners with Housing Authority in all aspects of the job. Well, when is that aspect going to get to work? Because I've asked them several times about simple things. Can I talk to the resident, not the resident, to the workers, because I want them to understand our position, because a lot of them don't know our position. They think we're just being nosy. No, we're advocates for the residents first, and for them indirectly too. But they have to learn to understand that. So I was told I can't talk to them because the unions say I can't talk to them, but we don't have an agreement with the union. They do. That's not our problem. That's your problem. Okay, we have an agreement with you. So what you do, live up to the agreement that we have with y'all, and things will work out. Because a lot of us have great ideas, but the ideas not being used. And that's the bottom line. So I don't want to talk y'all to death, because I wasn't prepared to talk, but everybody that knows me know I talk anyway. But I say my bottom line is this here, what we have to do is start looking at each other as family and partners. And if we do both of those things there, none of us can go wrong. And that's the whole thing in a nutshell. So I'm going to say that, and I appreciate y'all giving me your time, and I appreciate it.
Amen.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, good afternoon. My name is Jessie Solomon. I'm the Executive Director of Southwest Brooklyn Industrial Development Corporation. And a proud member of GNCJ. And I want to say that, ad nauseum, again and again, SBIDC supports the core demands of GNCJ, which is full funding for NYCHA, capital funding for NYCHA, net zero CSO, and of course, as SJ was saying, a task force to ensure the accountability of the city for this rezoning. So SBIDC is providing services to the industrial businesses in this community and workforce development and job training for local residents for over 40 years. Now more than ever, the Gowanus neighborhood rezoning needs to support an equitable and just recovery from the COVID-19 economic crisis. In order to do that, the rezoning needs to include investments into Gowanus's industrial employers who have provided quality jobs in this community for years. These investments should include infrastructure updates to prevent the constant flooding and drainage issues, especially in the industrial business zone in Gowanus.
That's right.
Workforce development and training to ensure local residents have access to career-building jobs, including our community's young people that Monica was talking about earlier. And finally, a zoning framework for the industrial business zone that limits competing uses and actually helps industrial employers remain here and grow in this neighborhood. Thank you, and again, my name is Jessie Solomon, and I'm going to turn it over to Johnny at Arts Gowanus.
Hi, my name is Johnny. I'm the Executive Director of Arts Gowanus, and I'm also an artist in the neighborhood. Our mission at Arts Gowanus is to support, promote, and advocate for local artists in order to create a sustainable arts community in Brooklyn. Arts Gowanus is also a proud member of GNCJ, and we fully support its top 3 demands. We believe these demands are 100% necessary to move our neighborhood forward in a responsible and equitable way. Arts Gowanus believes that the creativity of local artists contributes to the vibrant cultural life of New York City. It is critical not only for artists, but society in general, that arts continue to thrive in Gowanus. Every artist has its own small business, and like so many neighborhoods before it, the creative community have been continuously priced out of their workspaces and forced to move out of this neighborhood. We believe this cycle needs to change. As it stands now, we believe the concept of the 0.3 FAR Gowanus mix with limited use groups is necessary to ensure the artists and light manufacturing will be able to flourish in Gowanus. Public oversight of all of the new zoning provisions as presented by the GNCJ is paramount to ensuring the Gowanus mix is used for specific user groups, and there's public disclosure and transparency in leasing agreements of all of these Gowanus mix spaces.
That's right. Transparency.
Right. bless you too. First of all, let's hear it for these fantastic Gowanus Neighborhood Coalition for Justice Testimonials Coalition partner organizers. I'm New York City Council member Brad Lander, and I'm very pleased to be here with City Council member Steve Levin, and we are proud to stand with GNCJ on your 3 core demands. Upfront capital funding for Gowanus and Wyckoff to make sure people's homes are fixed.
Yeah, that's right.
A net zero CSO, no additional pollution from the rezoning into the Gowanus Canal, and a community-based commitment task force that makes sure the commitments made are commitments kept. And let's be clear, we will only support the rezoning if those 3 core demands are met.
That's right.
Today is the first public hearing at the community board level, so this process has a ways to go before it reaches the city council. But when it reaches the city council, Steve and I are committed to making sure those 3 core demands of GNCJ are met before we will vote in favor of any Gowanus neighborhood rezoning. Is that clear?
Yes, yes, yes.
I'll speak just a little bit more about each of them. And on number 1, I want to make clear, I'm frustrated that we are still fighting for it. You know, you're going to look at this thing where there's at least a check minus number 2. The fact that the box is empty on number 1 is, in my opinion, a real failing on the part of City Hall, because this coalition for 5+ years has been making clear the number 1 community. There's a lot of things in the Gowanus rezoning, and we're going to start talking about them today. And there's getting new affordable housing. There's making sure that there's active waterfront open space. There's reducing pollution. There's preserving arts. There's preserving and strengthening manufacturing. There's increasing and strengthening diversity. There's an enormous amount that we've been talking about and debating, all appropriate. But the number 1 demand of the community, the Gowanus Neighborhood Coalition for Justice and many, many others for 5+ years, has been invest upfront capital in Gowanus and Wyckoff, and the fact that there is still no meaningful offer on the table, honestly no offer on the table whatsoever, when we are here at the Community Board 6 public hearing to begin public testimony on the rezoning, is unacceptable.
Unacceptable. That's right.
You know, that there is an appropriate part of negotiations through the ULURP process. Like Steve and I have been through this a lot of times, and we get that you go through this process and you debate, will there be funding for this new park, or will there be this intersection get addressed? And you negotiate those things through the ULURP, and that's how the ULURP process goes. It should not be that way with the community's number 1 demand. We already should know how we are going to address the existing needs. Because let's remember, you know, we're not talking about new like roof gardens. We're talking about people's kitchens and bathrooms and elevators and stairwells and lighting and electricity and just basic housing needs that every single person deserves, and that our neighbors in Gowanus and Wyckoff do not currently have. So this is not like some, negotiating position. This is just basic decency. We want a more inclusive community, and that's why we're talking about this rezoning from the beginning. But how could you say there'll be 3,000 new, beautiful, newly built affordable housing units, and then say to your neighbors who have been here for years, for decades,
40 years.
that you don't have a plan to make sure that their homes are in basic, decent, habitable condition? So that's like demand number 1. It's been demand number 1 for more than 5 years, and we're not going anywhere until that happens. I'll be briefer on the other 2 because you heard really useful things about what it means to make sure there's no additional sewage in the canal. We're going to fight and stand up and make sure that happens. We've written a letter to the EPA to ask them to take a look at the city's modeling and make sure that the new Stormwater Rule will indeed protect the remedy, keep the Gowanus Canal clean, and we're going to fight to make sure that that is true. And then look, Steve and I are in our last few months now, so this principle that there must be a community-based task force is because the community deserves it. The community's done the organizing, the community has done the planning, the community needs to be at the table in making sure the commitments made are commitments kept. But it's also true that we're not going to be there to do it, and so that must be there. And I just want to add, because you heard this a little bit from Ed, but I just want to flag there's a broad community-based task force to make sure broadly that commitments made are commitments kept, and then there needs to be a very specific and focused set of oversight with public housing leadership and with public housing tenants to make sure the commitments made in NYCHA are commitments kept as well. My last word and there'll be a lot of other things to talk about. I gotta hustle because we're gonna go testify in just a minute, and I'm gonna be back and forth on Zoom and in person to really mostly listen today. And that listening is what I have been so proud to be part of doing with you, because I have actually never seen in my time in public office a coalition that's done the organizing work on a land use and planning and development issue like the Gowanus Neighborhood Coalition. This stuff is hard, and we know it's hard. These are the most contentious issues, but they matter. They're not just for shouting, they're not just for signs, they're not just for yelling. People's homes, people's lives, our neighborhoods matter. And the fact that you have built this coalition of public housing residents and private housing residents, of homeowners and tenants, of environmentalists, of artists, of small manufacturers, of people who care about building a sustainable and inclusive neighborhood, stuck together through a lot of years and a lot of challenges, built a clear set of demands, but then all these other important issues as well that we will still be fighting for. That's really what community planning and community organizing are supposed to look like. And I just want to say how grateful. We could not even be thinking about whether this would be appropriate without the grassroots organizing work of every member, every organizational member, and all the people here and the hundreds more that have taken part in the Gowanus Neighborhood Coalition for Justice. So thank you all for doing that. We're going to stick together and get this done.
So, for the first time since COVID started, I have a cold. I'm going to leave my mask on just because, I'm still a little nervous about it.
All right.
Okay, got it.
Keep it on.
Keep it on.
Keep it on.
Right, and I think that public speaking is probably not like the best thing. But I'll just say this: that it's $273 million. $74 million past due. That's the capital needs of Wyckoff and Gowanus. And you don't get to that point unless you have some serious neglect.
Right.
You don't get to the point where that's what your maintenance cost is. And that's what is needed to get your property in good standing, unless you have really, really dropped the ball. And that's the reality. That's up to that landlord. And that landlord is New York City Housing Authority. That's the responsibility of our federal government. It's also the responsibility of our city government.
That's right.
State government as well. And so this effort, as everybody's been saying for years, this is not about really getting something new and ostentatious or fancy.
Right.
This is about making sure you don't have mold in your house, and knowing that in order to fix the mold, you have to fix the plumbing. In order to fix the paint, you have to fix the plumbing. And knowing that this is about keeping up the bones of these buildings, because we're not in a position to build new public housing in New York City. We don't have the money, but we do have the ability to preserve public housing in New York City.
Yeah.
We do have the ability to do that. And when we're looking at doing things from a zoning perspective that's going to, in the years to come, generate hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue. The reality question we should be wrestling with, and this is where GNCJ has been at the forefront of this, is where does that benefit go? Where does that public benefit go? And I'm sure that there are some people that say, let it go to, the general fund. Let it go towards policing, or let it whatever.
Or rad conversions elsewhere.
But what we're saying is this has to go back into the community, into the people who have lived in this community and built this community for decade after decade after decade. It's been, for me, the last 12 years, it's been the honor of my life to be able to represent this district and work with the amazing communities of Wyckoff and Gowanus and Warren Street. And I've gotten to know these amazing families who have stuck with this community year after year and invested the sweat equity in it and our rent money and the rent money.
Let's be
And
clear.
they deserve to be able to raise their families in a place where they're not going to get asthma from the mold, that they're not going to be having the water drip down, in the bathroom for 2 years before he's got a plaster in to fix it, just so that it'll fall apart again. So this is about basic values. This is about values as a city. This is about our values and what we stand for as a community. And so I just wanted to say that this is not a posture or a negotiating stance. This is really about what are our priorities, what are our values. And I just want to thank Brad and GNCJ. It's been Brad said 5 years. It's been 8 years since we first had meetings about this. Summer of 2013 were the first meetings, public meetings. I remember they were hot.
Yes. Yes.
Still are.
Yeah, and that Our Lady of Peace auditorium.
How ironic. It's been a long time. And this is what community planning looks like. And frankly, this is a really strong demonstration that stuff is hard. It takes time. It takes community. It takes working together. It takes working through these issues. It takes meetings. It takes discussions. It takes difficult conversations. None of this was easy. No way. And I think that's a strong lesson. As we're moving out of the council for future elected representatives and for future community leaders, roll up your sleeves. Get ready to roll up your sleeves because this stuff isn't easy. And nothing happens. Nothing happens. One last thing just about having that community accountability task force. So when I first came into the council, up in Greenport, the other end of my district, we have this thing called the NICMIC. It's Newtown Creek Monitoring Committee. So, we have down here, we got the Gowanus Canal, up there we got the Newtown Creek. And in the 90s, they had to do a zoning to build the wastewater treatment facility up there. And Ken Fisher was the councilman at the time. And he made sure to get into that EULA, the creation of this entity called NICMIC. And there were some really wonderful volunteers that dedicated their time and met every single month and held DEP accountable. And these are just like school teachers, and this is a small group, neighborhood people. They became experts on wastewater and construction and DEP contracts. And they were like, "What's up with contract 24B? Why is this not starting?" And for years. And it was the mechanism to hold the city accountable. And actually, just last month, they opened up the final part of the nature walk, which is just part of this. It's the open space commitment that was part of this. It took 20 years, longer, 25 years to build this thing. And I'm not saying that that's a good example, but it was because of that community group and the dedicated volunteers that met month after month after month, and they stale pizza after stale pizza after stale pizza to make sure that happened. And so it's an essential part of what needs to happen. And I just want to thank GNCJ for making sure that that's a priority.